She was just 18 when she left American Bandstand, but Joyce Shafer's name never disappeared into the background. Born on August 6, 1943 in Philadelphia, she was one of those rare teenagers who came alive the moment the cameras rolled. With her constant partner Norman Kerr, Joyce helped define what teenage America looked like on screen at the turn of the 1960s, graceful yet approachable, spirited yet genuine. A magazine profile of the time summed it up with a memorable phrase, "Off bandstand, but on with fun." That was Joyce, someone who could step away from television but still remain a part of people's lives through letters, clubs, and gatherings that carried her name across the nation. And then there was that uncanny cultural echo. Sue Thompson's hit song Norman climbing the charts in 1961, perfectly marrying the name of Joyce's dance partner as though popular music itself was saluting the pair. Her story raises a question that resonates even today. How did Joyce Shafer, a teenager who left the stage just as she became an adult, manage to hold on to the hearts of so many for decades? The answer lies not only in her dancing, but in the personality and warmth that made her unforgettable. When Joyce Shafer first set foot inside the WFIL TV studio on 46th and Market Street, she was still just a Philadelphia teenager with a love for music and movement. The studio was crowded most afternoons with local kids eager to dance, hoping the camera might catch them. For Joyce, however, it wasn't luck that made her visible. She had a natural poise that set her apart. From the way she carried herself to the effortless rhythm in her steps, Joyce had the rare ability to look at home in front of a national audience. At the time, American Bandstand was more than just a television show. It was a cultural meeting ground where the dreams and fashions of America's teenagers were broadcast to living rooms across the country. Every day, young people lined up outside the studio, dressed in their best, waiting for a chance to be part of the action. The Philadelphia regulars became celebrities in their own right, and Joyce was one of them. Noticeable not because she demanded attention, but because the camera seemed to find her naturally. Her steady partner on the floor was Norman Kerr, born in January 1944. Together, they offered an image that audiences embraced, a boy and girl whose movements mirrored the rhythms of a new generation. They didn't overwhelm the screen with tricks or exaggerated gestures. Instead, they embodied what many viewers wished for themselves: chemistry, ease, and the kind of youthful joy that made every record seem alive. Their partnership was not just a pairing for convenience, it was a friendship that made their dancing believable and their presence magnetic. For Joyce, those early years on Bandstand were more than just afternoons spent dancing. They were moments of belonging. She found herself among a community of teenagers who, for a brief period, became ambassadors of American youth. The friendships, the laughter off to the side of the set, the nervous glances before the red light of the camera blinked on. These details made the experience vivid and unforgettable. By the late 1950s and into the early 1960s, television was rapidly reshaping culture, and Joyce stood at the heart of that transformation. To viewers, she was no longer just a girl from Philadelphia. She was part of the new American story being told through music, dance, and the television screen. By 1961, the American youth scene was in the grip of a new obsession: the pony. Unlike the twist, which had already captured national attention, the pony was faster, sharper, and carried a kind of playful energy that seemed to belong to teenagers alone. It wasn't just a dance, it was a way of expressing youth itself, and few dancers embodied it better than Joyce Shafer. The timing could not have been more perfect. That same year, Chubby Checker released Pony Time, and suddenly the dance was everywhere. For the millions of teens who tuned into Bandstand each day, watching Joyce and her partner Norman Kerr perform the pony was like seeing the craze come alive in their own living rooms. With her quick footwork, effortless balance, and sparkling smile, Joyce made the pony look not only easy but irresistible. Her talent did not go unnoticed. Joyce became a pony contest winner, a title that meant far more than a trophy. In the context of Bandstand, where new dances were born and validated, winning such a contest made her one of the faces of the moment. It was an achievement that etched her into the show's lore, elevating her from a familiar dancer to a standout personality remembered for years afterward. What made her victory so compelling was how naturally it seemed to happen. Joyce wasn't a show-off, nor did she appear to be chasing the spotlight. She simply moved with a joy and clarity that television could not ignore. For the viewers, many of them teenagers themselves, it was easy to imagine being like Joyce, winning over a crowd without pretension. She became the girl next door who also happened to be a champion, proof that talent and charm could rise from the ranks of ordinary kids. The pony itself would eventually fade, like so many dance crazes before it, but for Joyce Shafer, it was a defining moment. That victory captured the spirit of the early 1960s, when a song could change the way young America moved, and a dancer on television could suddenly become a national symbol. Joyce may have left the show at 18, but the memory of her pony triumph ensured she remained part of Bandstand's golden story. Stepping away from the television spotlight could have ended Joyce Shafer's visibility, but in her case, it sparked something different. Once she left Bandstand, she discovered that her popularity was not tied solely to the studio cameras. Instead, it flourished through the growing network of teen fan clubs that had sprung up around the country. These groups treated Joyce not as a distant celebrity, but as someone they knew personally, a girl whose dancing and personality had touched their lives. The reach of these fan clubs was remarkable. Two in particular stood out, one in Alhambra, California, and another in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. That her admirers organized themselves thousands of miles apart on opposite sides of the country proved that Joyce's charm traveled far beyond Philadelphia. Local teenagers would meet, share photographs, trade news clippings, and circulate newsletters devoted to her. Scrapbooks filled with her images became treasured possessions, symbols of a cultural connection that television had made possible. Joyce responded in kind. Unlike some dancers who drifted quickly from view, she kept up correspondence with fans, answering letters whenever she could. Descriptions of her stack of mail became almost legendary among bandstand circles. Each envelope represented a young person who had been moved by what they saw on television, someone who wanted to carry a piece of Joyce's world into their own. For many, a reply from her was more than just a note. It was a keepsake from the very heart of America's teen culture. This relationship between Joyce and her fans reflected the unique bond created by Bandstand. The show blurred the line between performer and audience, turning local teenagers into national figures. Joyce embodied that transformation. She was approachable enough to feel like a friend, yet special enough to inspire organized devotion across the country. Her fan clubs became living proof that television had the power to make ordinary lives extraordinary. Even after her departure, Joyce remained a big wheel in this network, a term magazines of the day used to describe teens who were not just popular, but central to a larger movement. While she no longer appeared daily on TV, her presence continued to be felt through these clubs, letters, and gatherings. For many, Joyce Shafer had already become more than a dancer. She was part of their own story of growing up in an unforgettable era. Joyce Shafer's appeal was never confined to the polished steps she performed on the dance floor. What many remember most vividly is her personality, bright, witty, and filled with the kind of humor that made every gathering lighter. In an environment where hundreds of teenagers cycled in and out of the Bandstand studio, Joyce stood out not just because of her dancing, but because of the warmth she carried into every room. She had the rare gift of making others feel comfortable, whether it was a fellow dancer nervous about being on camera or a fan who finally worked up the courage to say hello. Her sense of humor became a defining trait. Friends and magazines of the era often spoke of her knack for spoofing, playful imitations and comedic sketches that revealed a budding entertainer beyond the world of dance. Joyce was known to mimic classmates, television stars, even her fellow regulars, always with a twinkle in her eye, never cruel but always funny. These moments of levity created a deeper bond with those around her. She was not just admired from a distance, she was loved for the way she made people laugh. One article painted a memorable picture of Joyce twirling with a broom, treating it like a partner in a comic routine. It may have been a simple image, but it symbolized so much about her character. Even without the music or the cameras, she carried with her a natural instinct to perform, to turn the ordinary into something memorable. A household object became part of a show because Joyce's imagination made it so. It is precisely these kinds of details that made her unforgettable to friends and fans alike. Those who danced beside her often remarked that Joyce was the kind of person who could diffuse tension in an instant. Live television was demanding, and competition for screen time could sometimes breed rivalries. But Joyce had a way of softening the atmosphere. A joke, a silly impression, or a burst of laughter could remind everyone that they were there to have fun. That balance of talent and humanity kept her in the memories of her peers long after the music stopped. In many ways, Joyce's humor revealed why she was so well loved. It showed she was more than just a dancer. She was an entertainer at heart, someone who carried joy wherever she went. For Joyce Shafer, the summer of 1961 marked a turning point. On August 6th, her 18th birthday, she quietly stepped away from American Bandstand. It was not an exit filled with fanfare or headlines, but for those who followed the show closely, her absence was deeply felt. Joyce had grown up in front of the cameras, and now, as she crossed into adulthood, she faced a decision that countless teens must eventually make: to leave behind a chapter that defined her youth and step toward something new. Her choice to leave came at a time when Bandstand itself was changing. The Philadelphia years were coming to a close, and the show would soon shift to Los Angeles. Many of the regulars were still in their late teens, but Joyce, having been part of the program for years, seemed ready for a new horizon. The timing aligned perfectly with her birthday, making her departure symbolic, closing the book on childhood just as adulthood officially began. Joyce did not leave without dreams for the future. In interviews and fan magazine features, she openly expressed her ambition to appear on a situation show, the term teenagers used then for sitcoms. Her talent for spoofing and mimicry gave weight to the idea. If she could bring laughter and warmth to her fellow dancers, why not to a wider audience through scripted comedy? Joyce had already proven she could connect with millions as a dancer. It was not hard to imagine her succeeding as an actress. Whether those ambitions materialized fully or not, the dream itself mattered. It revealed that Joyce saw herself not only as a dancer, but as a performer with more to offer. She did not want her story to end with the last step on Bandstand's dance floor. She wanted to grow, to try new stages, and to embrace the opportunities that came with adulthood. Even as she looked ahead, the bond with her fans endured. Letters continued to arrive, fan clubs remained active, and magazines still carried her name. To many young people, Joyce's departure at 18 mirrored their own coming of age. She reminded them that growing up meant change, but it did not erase the memories already created. Her decision to leave the show became part of her story's meaning. She was not just a girl who danced on Bandstand, but someone who chose to walk into a new life with courage and hope. Once Joyce Shafer stepped away from American Bandstand, her life began to shift in ways that reflected a broader journey from teenager to adult. Over time, she became known by another name, Joyce Roth Shafer, a signal of the personal milestones that followed her television years. While her married life and family story remained largely private, this new name appeared at reunions, fan gatherings, and in community posts, bridging the gap between the girl viewers remembered and the woman she became. Unlike many of her fellow dancers who disappeared completely from the public eye, Joyce maintained a quiet but steady connection to the Bandstand community. Decades after her last televised dance, she would surface at reunions or appear in fan newsletters, always welcomed with affection. Those who had once watched her on black and white screens now met her in person at events, often remarking on how little her warmth had changed. The girl who once twirled with Norman Kerr in Philadelphia had grown older, but the essence that had captivated audiences remained intact. Her continuing presence underscored a truth about Bandstand itself. It was never just a show, it was a family. Former regulars often spoke about the way the program bonded them for life, and Joyce embodied that sentiment. She answered letters long after the cameras were gone, and in later years, she used community groups and online spaces to maintain her friendships and share updates. In one message, she apologized for not being able to respond to everyone as quickly as she would like, a reminder of the same sincerity she showed when answering stacks of mail in her teenage years. For fans, seeing her name as Joyce Roth Shafer was not a sign of distance, but a sign of continuity. It meant she had embraced adulthood, built a life beyond the spotlight, but had never abandoned the legacy that tied her to so many. The duality of her identity, Shafer on Bandstand, Roth in later life, symbolized how a single person could hold on to both youth and maturity, keeping one foot in memory and the other in the present. Through it all, Joyce proved that her story was larger than the few years she spent on television. She showed that growing up did not mean erasing the past. It meant carrying it forward, reshaped, but never forgotten. Even decades after she left the floor at American Bandstand, Joyce Shafer remained a presence in the lives of those who had grown up watching her. On March 14, 2021, she sent a heartfelt message to her community through a Facebook group dedicated to Bandstand Memories. She explained she was facing health challenges and awaiting hip surgery, apologizing for not being able to reply as often as she wished, but her words carried the same warmth she had always shown. She thanked her friends for their patience, reminded them how much she loved them, and promised that she would be back when she could. It was a letter filled with affection, the kind of message that made her feel close to her fans even 60 years after her first appearance on television. That moment illustrated what her story has always been about. Joyce's legacy was never only about steps or contests, it was about connection. She embodied the spirit of an era when teenagers could dance their way into America's heart, and she showed that those ties could endure across generations. Her journey leaves us with a simple reminder. Some faces never truly leave the dance floor of memory. And if you'd like to keep celebrating stories like Joyce's, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so these memories, like the music, can keep playing on.